They end up, however, drawing from New Age sources, books, DVDs, etc. And that was one of the underlying issues that never really got into the public media, oh no, about the South Brisbane community. Now, there's a group of Catholics who went in one afternoon with a little camera, and they went to the bookstall in the South Brisbane church where Father Kennedy and his people have been worshipping until recently, and they photographed the covers and the little blurb on the back of the books. Most of the stuff was New Age, and not at all from Christian sources or even pseudo-Christian sources. That was one of the underlying problems of the lack, loss and fall of faith in that community. When liberal Catholics of the radical fringe, particularly with all the ideas of the 1970s still in their heads, when they become alienated from a church led by John Paul II and Benedict, and are deeply stressed to see thousands of young people in Sydney celebrating life and love and loving the Pope and the Church and happy to be relaxed Catholics and wanting to learn and love the faith and the riches of our tradition, they move off, not into atheism necessarily, but they slip into New Age. This is one of the big surprises. Some people have looked at it and said, well, it was predictable. We couldn't see it. You could have, 30 years ago, I couldn't see that. 20 years ago, I can see, but it's certainly happening now to what is left of that element in the church. A lot of them have moved in that direction, which is tragic, very tragic, because they're good, sincere people. Nobody's saying they're not. But it shows how if you let your faith dry out, if you replace it by a rationalist kind of watered down, dried out, whatever analogy you like to push, there's a mixing of metaphors, a form of Christianity that we call modernism. If you do that, the door flies open to swallow anything. As G.K. Chesterton says, when modern people stop to believe in God, they don't believe in nothing. They end up believing in anything. And so I think we have to watch that trend and be sensitive to it, because you're going to bump into it if you haven't already, even within our community. Not widespread, but it's there. So the New Age is not something that I'm attacking from the outside. I've got to face it as part of what is going on within the Catholic community. Now, having said that, there's an introductory presentation. Anyone wants to start raising issues, questions, or probing anything you like, it's open now.
A question. When someone commits a sin, like obviously by breaking one of the Ten Commandments, the side effects are quite obvious. For instance, like if someone's committed murder, side effects on other people, the consequences, family mourning, a long list of consequences. But when one breaks the first commandment of loving God, and I guess that's what this whole topic's been about, what are the consequences on other people?
That is a very good question, because first of all, we realise that human beings are not self-contained individuals. That is a false 18th century understanding of the person, the ultra-individualism, which is now politically very powerful in the postmodern age, the selfishness, etc., that John Paul II used to attack, and that we see coming to the surface in women's right for abortion and all that sort of thing. So the individual, me, my. But that's not the way we're built. We are social beings. We relate to others. The first group of people we relate to is the natural unit of society, the living cell, the family. Husband, wife, children, parents. And it's within the family that deliberate, and here we have to be careful because they're not always that deliberate. God knows this, and we're not to judge too much. When people sin against the first commandment of loving God and worshipping God and turn to false gods, which is what we're talking about tonight, the effects in the family are only too evident. It's often parents will come in despair because a son or a daughter has got hooked up into some New Age cult. And that's another area we could talk about tonight, because some forms of the New Age, they form their own community, a kind of pseudo-church thing, cults and social groups. But the effect within the family is where it's first felt. So you start to hurt other people inevitably. But we all make choices, and some of them are right and wrong, and some of them hurt people anyway. So we can't say this is just tied up with breaking the first commandment. That would be too rigid and narrow. But it's quite obvious that once this sets in, it affects. Also, the effect on the personality of an introverted person. Now, I'll give you a picture of the kind of person who gets into really deep New Age. I'm not saying people just play with crystals or might go into a medium or a psychic and pay $50 to know whether they're going to win the next sweep or something. I mean, I'm talking about people who really get into it in a deep way. Here, the personality profile has been studied and looked at for many years. This has had to be part of work to get people out of cults, communes and that sort of thing. It's been going on for years. Usually it's a person who's very insecure, maybe a child in the middle of the family group, a bit overlooked, needs building up, not affirmed, looks for something, then discovers secret knowledge. Oh, I can go right to the Rosicrucians and they'll give me secret knowledge and I'll become a member of a hidden society that's been round since history began, all these fairy tales, again, Da Vinci stuff, and maybe, you know, what's the name, the Illuminati or something, I'll join this group. And a lot of them have names like this, and then they start, it pumps the personality up. But it pumps that personality up and gives them a false confidence. I recall a nun who worked in this area at one stage, lovely lady. She was one of those very quiet little mousy nuns, you know, wouldn't say boo, a bit like Sister Wendy on television, very sweet. And she turned up in Rome, rang me and said, oh, I want to come out to lunch and I'm in Rome. And there was this woman all lit up like Christmas trees, staring eyes and talking and chattering. Personality changed. What had done it? The Enneagram. She couldn't stop talking about the blessed Enneagram. And I didn't know much about it at the time, so I did some looking up and then I found out. No, of course, you should know Archbishop Hart has sent a directive out. It's banned in Melbourne Archdiocese. And there have been Christians playing games with Enneagrams and courses, even had schools offering courses for the parents or the teachers. And the Enneagram is supposed to be Sufi wisdom, that side, the mystical side of Islam from Turkey or something. Actually, it all comes from a chap called Gurdjieff, who was a New Age occultist. He died in the early 20th century, if I remember rightly, and he revamped it and redid it and made it into a personality measuring thing with all these types. But she got so obsessed with it that it became like a planchette or the Ouija board sort of thing. It became like that in her life. And I think she was heading for a breakdown. The poor darling came back to Australia. She later died. But I saw she was destabilised. Now, she was an innocent person. You see, this is, again, you're not looking at a bad woman who was out to do... No, and this innocent victim of it. But it thoroughly destabilised her personality. And I don't think it'd be much fun living in community. The other sisters must have had a wow of a time with her carrying on with that all day. You would have got Enneagram at breakfast, lunch and dinner. And everyone had to do it. And she kept telling me, you must be a personality B5 something. I said, oh, am I? Oh, interesting. Oh, fascinating. And I thought, I don't want to know. I couldn't care less. But this is the kind of personality. And then you get people, the worst form, we've had a bit of this on television recently. There was a boy in New South Wales who carried out a horrific murder of a girl. And he got caught up with a kind of Satanist thing, largely his own invention. But it was a personality inversion, and he put eyeshadow around his eyes, and he went all gothic in his dress. Some of the gothic stuff contend to this, to be blunt about it, the gothic cult. And also, you see, I'm different, but I will conform to my little group because they pump me up and make me strong. That's part of the cult thing, whether it's wearing gothic clothes, piercing yourself till there's not much left to pierce, and all that sort of thing. Or just having a private cult thing which suddenly explodes in a homicide.